All right, so chapter 8, we talk about photosynthesis. So chapter 7, we're talking about the metabolism, the respiration, if you will, of glucose and harvesting of energy from glucose and then other compounds as well. Chapter 8, we're going to talk about photosynthesis, how those sugars like glucose get built up. How do we take these low energy compounds like carbon dioxide and water and pour a bunch of energy into these and make them more complex, build them up into a carbohydrate like glucose or fructose? How do we do that? Well, plants do that through a process called photosynthesis. Where does the energy come from? Because there's a lot of energy stored in this carbohydrate here. Where does that energy come from? Well, plants have figured out a clever way to harvest light energy normally from the sun, but they can use grow lights as well. They can use different lights that emit light frequencies that they need, and they can, and that's perfectly fine. A byproduct of this process, so if you look here, there's 6 carbon dioxide, so there's 12 oxygens here. There's 6 waters, so that's 6 more oxygens. So there's a total of 18 oxygens coming into this process. 18 oxygens getting into this process. The glucose, the fructose, only has 6 oxygens. Conservation of mass says that that's got to go somewhere. And mass is like energy. It has to be conserved. So where do all these oxygens go? Well, that becomes a byproduct. So there's 6 times 2. There's 12 oxygens here. So there's 12 and 6 oxygens there. So it's 18 oxygens on this side. I've only got 6 here. I've got to get rid of the other 12 somewhere. And this is the oxygen that we breathe, that we need for metabolism of glucose and other sugars. You and I need this oxygen so we can burn the sugars and the other compounds that are produced through the citric acid cycle. So that's where oxygen in the atmosphere comes from. All right, so we're just kind of a zoom out overview version here. We've seen this diagram before. Oh, sorry, no, back, wrong way. my mouse on this computer, the mouse wheel rolls very easily, sorry. Okay, so we've seen this diagram here before where we're saying, look, the sun puts in energy and the plants and other producers then store that energy, that other organisms then can consume that. Fungi and bacteria can break it down also. That goes heat out into the environment, and the process repeats. And what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, look, a little better view, a little more view of that. This diagram's in your text. Again, sunlight comes in, sugars are produced in the photosynthetic materials, oxygen gets emitted as a waste product, carbon dioxide comes in, water comes in through the root systems. So water plus carbon dioxide plus sun makes sugar. Glucose, fructose, and others. All right, so some terminology here. Photosynthesis involved terminology. Autotrophs, heterotrophs, and chemoautotrophs. Chemoautotrophs, I should say, chemoautotrophs. Autotrophs, auto meaning self, troph just simply meaning feeder or consume. So an autotroph is a self-feeder, those that use light to manufacture their own food. As we mentioned, they're using the energy from the light and storing that energy, some of that energy, into higher energy compounds like sugars. Plants, algae, there are some cyanobacteria that will also go through this process, that go through a photosynthesis process. So, but mostly plants and algae are really kind of where a lot of our sunlight gets converted to sugars. Heterotrophs, that's like you and I. But that's also like the herbivores, like cattle, sheep, and other organisms that only consume directly autotrophs. Now, you and I will consume autotrophs, we'll consume vegetables and plant material, but we'll also consume other heterotrophs. So heterotrophs can be carnivores, they can be omnivores, they can be herbivores. All of those are heterotrophs, but those are other, hetero meaning other, troph meaning consumer or eater. So these are other eaters, if you will. It's the way to think about that. Chemoautotrophs are those that can kind of specialized organism that can utilize some other energy source to store energy, right, or to provide to generate ATP from them to run their other reactions within the cell. So chemoautotrophs, a lot of times we'll find these like at high temperature steam vents and at the bottom of an ocean or something like that, where volcanic materials oozing up at the bottom of the surface of the ocean, and that has lots of energy. Those organisms have mechanisms in place that they can utilize that. It doesn't come from the sun, doesn't necessarily get stored as sugar. They're just using it, that energy in other ways. All right, I'm going to stop there. I'm a little over 5 minutes.